Hello, we are Larry Riggs and Sandra Hellyer Riggs, and our presentation is entitled Overcoming Egocentric and Sociocentric Thought, From Knowledge to Commitment in Critical Thinking. For the purposes of this paper, we will define critical thinking as awareness of biases, especially of egocentric and sociocentric thought, and most importantly, as recognition of the costs in real historical situations of such thought. Such awareness and recognition can and should lead to a commitment to overcome biases and avoid errors that are costly to self and or others. Critical thinking, then, is thinking for moral agency. McPeck made a powerful point for us. McPeck stated that critical thinking is best fostered in the context of what we think of as a liberal education. Familiarity with a variety of types of material and of thinking from an array of disciplines is required, McPeck contended, if critical thinking is to develop. A key question, then, is what kinds of knowledge and understanding are likely to have the most universal value? Agreeing with McPeck, we believe that the disciplines or content areas involved in the courses we will speak about here are promising ones for encouraging students to think critically. The first author teaches a general education course that is part of the core curriculum of a small private university. This course focuses on modernizing in contemporary Europe. In the author's version of the course, egocentric and sociocentric thinking are made explicit themes from the start. From Columbus's landing on Hispaniola, through the long history of imperialism, nationalism, and war, to social Darwinism, racism, and the Holocaust, European sociocentric tendency to regard members of other groups as less than human is examined. The consequences of egocentric and sociocentric thinking are evident. The European Union is looked at and evaluated as a collective attempt to get beyond such thinking and to approach the reality of contemporary international relations differently. Egocentric and sociocentric thinking are most deeply rooted in the areas of identity and vested interests. Students come to this course thinking of themselves as modern and of modernity or modernization as an entirely positive process. They have an interest in maintaining this position, and confronting the downside of modernity is a challenge. In fact, ambivalence is characteristic of truly critical thinking, and this course focuses on issues about which it is not possible to draw secure, unambiguous conclusions. For example, nationalism, which is clearly a kind of sociocentric thinking, is a major theme in the modern history of Europe. Students are asked to recognize that when it inspires rebellion against imperial domination, nationalism appears to be a liberating force. However, the same idea that a nation or people should be governed by its own political state has sometimes led to ethnic cleansing and genocide. Moreover, Europeans, like Americans, have often celebrated their own nationalism and condemned that of people they found it profitable to dominate. Reading literary works like All Quiet on the Western Front and Survival in Auschwitz focuses students' attention on the calamitous consequences of sociocentric thinking when it becomes a worldview. The course poses the problem of egocentric and sociocentric thinking in a powerful way. Students are moved toward what Hostetler called moral agency. In this course, the students' best opportunities to practice critical thinking come toward the end, when we read T.R. Reid's The United States of Europe. Having looked at the European Union as Europe's attempt to overcome the consequences of centuries of sociocentric thinking, we read and evaluate Reid's argument that the EU is, in many ways, superior to the United States and destined to replace the U.S. as the world's moral and economic leader. Like a number of other scholars and commentators, Reid emphasized Europe's choice to develop and exercise soft power, as opposed to the hard military power possessed and exercised by the U.S. Reid also argued that the EU, by many measures, provides a better life for its citizens than does the U.S. Most students reflexively reject Reid's comparison and give ready-made reasons for doing so. As their culminating assignment for the most recent edition of the course, however, the students were challenged to write an essay, including a reflection section, in which they presented and argued for criteria by which to judge societies, and then sought evidence related to those criteria. Criteria such as life expectancy, healthy life expectancy, infant mortality, diversity, policies for supporting families, voter enfranchisement, and others were presented by students. Having chosen such criteria for judging the quality of societies, students were in a position to look at and evaluate the wealth of relevant information that is readily available. Most students were surprised to find the U.S. well behind most EU members on indices that they, the students, had chosen as the most important. Both the philosophical choice of criteria and the search for information relevant to those criteria are key components of real critical thinking. The students had thought critically about the values that ought to dominate thinking about society and the problems that ought to be solved. In the process, they had gone far beyond reflexive defense of their own identity and interests.
I teach educational psychology courses at a large public institution, and the content of the courses I teach is ideal for exploring ideas and sharing impressions. One key element to encourage students to think critically, I feel, is to create a safe place in the classroom to engage in critical self-reflection as students consider where their views and impressions may have originated. Moving from egocentric and sociocentric thinking to critical thinking is a continual process of being challenged by new information and finding oneself in a new place in which one has to take stock of current knowledge before moving on to gain new knowledge. Students come to class with sociocentric assumptions about a lot of issues that I cover in our lifespan development course. One example of student sociocentric thinking that I encountered in a recent section of the course was their conviction that the United States, being a wealthy nation, has low infant mortality rates compared to other developed countries. The results of a poll that I took on the first day of class indicated that students thought that the United States has healthy babies with relatively low infant mortality rates because we have all the advantages of advanced medical care, that almost all moms get prenatal care, deliver their babies at a hospital with their doctor present, and have very few complications. The students were asked to explore how they arrived at their answers to the poll questions. All students admitted that their answers were based on what they thought they knew about prenatal care in our society. Once students read the exercise, or read the content on infant mortality from the text, researched the information online, and discussed their findings with their peers, they realized that they were incorrect in many of their views on infant mortality in the United States. Students began to move from their egocentric, sociocentric thinking to more critical thinking when they were challenged by their findings. They were forced to think about their inferences and assumptions based on the new information they had gathered. New information forced them to question their investment in a certain identity and certain perceived interests. They realized that not all mothers can afford prenatal care, and some mothers never see a physician before giving birth. Some mothers only see a medical provider in the last trimester when critical organs have already formed. In fact, 1 out of every 6 pregnant women has insufficient prenatal care, which results in higher infant mortality rates. To further expand their thinking on this topic, I have students work in groups of 4 to create lists of possible reasons for the high rate of infant mortality and possible solutions to the item on the list. They cited the lack of national health care insurance in the United States, higher rates of pregnant women smoking, which causes low birth rate babies, and ultimately can lead to infant mortality, women uneducated about the necessity of prenatal care, unpaid maternity leaves for new mothers, and lack of support at home after their child is born. Students brainstormed some solutions to the social problem of infant mortality. Better health care insurance for moms who live in poverty, better education on the health hazards of smoking while pregnant, better education on the health advantages of breastfeeding, and better prenatal care, and better parental leaves for the new mom and dad. The culmination of this assignment was to have students write a reflection paper describing the process by which their thinking was changed. Students' reflections described how they thought they knew about infant mortality, how their ideas were formed and changed after reading and researching, and the process they went through in changing their schemas on infant mortality. Unless students are motivated to take a serious look at their thinking and how they arrive at their inferences and conclusions, they will remain unreflective thinkers, bound by egocentric and sociocentric thought, unaware of the determining role thinking is playing in their lives, and inexperienced in how to fix their thinking.